Now, following the release of Ibrahim Babangida's book on what happened or the history of Nigeria as he knew it to be, it has confirmed so many things. Now, this is just a kind of uh, summary of everything that was in the book. Some of the important things to pick out from the book. First, that the 1966 coup was not an Igbo coup, but somewhat of a revolution. It was just a revolution aimed at regime change and installing Awolowo as the provisional president of Nigeria. That was the aim. In other words, if it could be said that the coup was tactically or covertly geared towards foisting ethnic domination, it was going to be a Yoruba domination, not an Igbo domination, because they wanted to install Awolowo. They saw the injustice done against Awolowo and they wanted to install Awolowo as the president of the country. So, if anything, it was to help the Yoruba and not Igbo. So, whether Igbo domination or Yoruba domination, the counter coup was overtly geared to northern domination. And worse, it midwifed a horrid blood loss and a total loss of compatriot spirit against the Igbos. So the counter coup was completely against the Igbos, just to a genocide plan against the Igbos. That was just it. And it was, planned by the northern officers and the north, to be precise. Secondly, those who purveyed the destructive lie that it was an evil coup were motivated by a satanic desire to trigger an anti-Igbo ethnic tension. That is just it. To trigger anti-Igbo tension on a national scale. On a national scale. In other words, a deliberate plot was hatched ahead of time to deploy the coup as a subterfuge to levy a genocide against Igbo. So the narrative that it was an Igbo coup was just a plot to have something to hold on to now, you know, come hard on the Igbo race. That was just it. Also, that Nzogu, he listed in his book that Nzogu, having been born and raised in Kaduna, not only spoke Hausa very fluently, but was more Hausa than Igbo in his mannerism, values, worldview, and attitude. So, Major Kaduna Nzogu was fully an Hausa man in his thoughts, character, behaviors, worldview, and everything. In other words, Nzogu was a confirmed Hausa man. Also, that the ranks of the coup plotters and henchmen were vastly populated by officers who were not Igbo. It was vastly populated by officers who were not Igbo. This was the most obvious clue that the belly, the lies, but it never mattered anyway because the die was cast for Igbo to pay. It was very obvious that most of the officers involved in that coup, the planning and execution of that coup, was, other officers, not the Igbo officers. The Igbo officers were few, but it was just a plan and a ploy to ensure that they turn everything around and level everything against the Igbo so that the Igbo will pay heavily for whatever that has happened. Also, that an Igbo officer, Nuforo, assassinated another Igbo officer, Unegbe, who rallied against the coup. This is what people do not, all these naysayers, all these liars on the internet do not want to tell you. That Anuforo, Major Anuforo, was the one who murdered Lieutenant Colonel Unegbe. Lieutenant Colonel Unegbe at the time, I think, was it the quarterguard, the officer in charge of armory. So Anuforo assassinated another Igbo officer, Unegbe, and Unegbe was against the coup. And another Igbo officer, Obieno, played a key role in halting the coup. So Obieno played a key role in halting, in stopping the coup. So how was it an Igbo coup when it was an Igbo officer who stopped the coup? And also an Igbo officer was assassinated during that coup. They have lied to you, convinced you that it was only officers from the other parts of the country that was, wiped, and not any officer from the Igbo race. But today, the truth is coming out that we continue to tell you a long time ago, but they denied it. Now, but when Obieno was later to be hounded and murdered by northern soldiers, it didn't matter to them that he put his life on the line to foil the Igbo coup. The supposed Igbo coup. They hired him without remembering that he was the one that stopped the coup. The only thing that mattered was that he was Igbo and therefore he must die. Also, the palpable tension between Ojukwu and Gowon stemmed from Ojukwu's altruistic insistence that the most senior officer, a Yoruba top brass named Babafemi Ogundipe, should, in accordance with time-honored military traditions, be the next head of state after Ironsi's gruesome assassination in the counter coup. Now, this was where Ojukwu's problem with Gowon started. Because Ojukwu said that the Yoruba officer named Babafemi Ogundipe should be crowned as the next head of state after the demise and the gruesome assassination of Aguiyi Ironsi. That was where the rift, the battle, the envy, and the problem between Gowon and Ojukwu started. Gowon wanted to be there, while Ojukwu said, no, it is the military tradition that the most senior assumes the most senior post. So the most senior at the time was Babafemi Ogundipe, and he ought to resume that position or assume that position as the head of state and nobody else, since he was the most senior officer at the time. So, as a matter of backward logical correlation, if the first coup was an Igbo coup driven by the ambition for Igbo domination, why would Ojukwu, an alpha male and ultimate Igbo man, take the great risk of insisting that the Yoruba man should be next head of state following the second coup? Why? This is the question that should come to mind of everyone. And the Ibrahim Babangida book revealed it. Ojukwu also declared Biafra because Gowon proved unwilling to protect the beleaguered and trapped Igbos. Gowon was unwilling to protect the Igbos who were being attacked everywhere in the north and the west. In other words, Biafra was not an unlawful rebellion, but it was against a horrendous genocide or a last resort to self-preservation. So Biafra was not, it wasn't something they just came and said, we want a nation. No, it was the last resort to ensure that the Igbo race, the people from the old Eastern region, were preserved and protected. That was what led to Biafra. So the truth is now out in the open. Who dares to say otherwise now? But going through this book, I thought of something else. The most senior officer at the time, Babafemi Ogundibe, why didn't that man fight for his rightful position when he knew he was the most senior officer and should assume the position of the head of state? Was he afraid? Or was he promised something else and he relinquished his position as the head of state for that, prize that was promised him? What went wrong? What happened? Thank you for listening. It is Biafra First.